All right, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Big Grimbowski. Tonight, I have with me Heidi Love from Unfiltered Rise podcast, who is going to tell me about her story when she born and raised into the Mormon Church. Correct?
Yes. Born and raised. Yep. And then escaped. Yeah. Took
So,
me
how are you
long
doing
enough to
tonight?
figure it out. I'm good. How you doing?
Not too terribly bad.
Awesome.
I
It's
wish the
always
weather was
good.
better.
Oh, is it raining there or
Yes.
something?
Well, I
That's
mean,
nice.
yeah, it rained all day yesterday, but like today, it's just all gloomy and
Ah,
chilly, and a lot of people are
it's
just like, "Oh,
fall.
I love the seasons. I love the seasons." I'm
Yeah.
like, "No, fuck these seasons. I don't like this shit. I don't like
I
being cold. I want to move to the south."
I don't like summer, so we are completely opposite. I hate summer. Yesterday, or yeah, it was yesterday when I talked to some guy about it. And I can't remember who, because I talked to like three people yesterday. But anyway, when I was talking to them, I'm like, summer's a scam. Like, it's way hot and I swell up and I feel like crap. Fall's the bomb. But like raining, I don't love rain, but I like
Right.
snow. I like snow. I live in
I
Utah.
I don't. I don't even like the snow.
Mhm.
We get a lot of it. I just think it's funny though, like when like Georgia or somewhere far south like that gets
Yeah,
like
it
a
snows.
half an inch of snow, like a light dusting, and they shut the whole entire state down. They don't know, no one knows how to handle
Yeah.
anything. They shut all the roads down, and I'm just like,
Push the
we
panic
get
button.
we get
Yeah.
like 6 feet of snow on average in the winter here. Like
Right.
that's
Yeah.
that's normal.
Oh, we get snow here. We get snow. This is actually the motto for our for all of our like license plates and everything used to be the greatest snow on earth because we have so many ski resorts and mountains and blah blah blah. So I get like 6 feet in my yard. Like
Right,
oh,
exactly.
it's snow up in this place for sure. It's it's a lot. Last year was a crazy winter and it lasted forever. Even as much as I love winter, I was like over it because it was like May, and I think we still had a couple of snowstorms in the mountains. And I was like, okay, knock it off up there. Quit playing with the weather because
Right, no kidding.
that's not organic at all. I'm like, stop it. And then they won't let you ski anyway past a certain time frame because of the avalanches. Like it starts to slip. So
Oh, I
yeah,
didn't even realize like that was like a thing. I mean,
yeah.
obviously avalanches, but I didn't think like there was like a specific like time frame where like you just like weren't allowed to be there because like
Yeah.
they happen more often. That's
Yeah, they kind
new
of
to
closed
me.
it up. Yeah, they were weird about it last year. They're like, oh, it got warm and then it got cold, so we don't know. And they just shut them down. I was like, oh, that sucks for the people that have passes, but I think they just low key were over it. I think they were
Right.
like, hit the button, it's enough, you know. I mean, those people usually don't work that long, so it's like a seasonal deal. But yeah, we get a lot of snow here. I'm not a skier. I never got to learn, so it sucks for me.
I did some snowboarding when I was like a teenager and stuff, and I had a lot of fun doing that, but not so much as an adult.
No, I just my back and everything hurts already. I don't need any help. Like
Right.
I'm always like, oh, I don't know. I mean, my husband's always like, oh, you could try again. I'm like, yeah, I have a hard time walking sometimes. So I think you go ahead. Take the kids.
Right. No
that's
kidding.
that's like a young man sport unless you're good at it. If you're good at it, if you're super good at it and you have like nothing broken on you, go right ahead. Don't Sonny Bono, you know.
Right. Like I'll be fine getting on my bicycle and go to
Hmm.
a skate park and riding
Yeah.
around. I can still do that, no problems. And I'll grind down a handrail or two or whatever. But like
Right.
I just that's too much coordination. It's too similar to skateboarding, and I can't
Yeah.
skateboard to save my life.
I was never coordinated enough for the whole skiing. I did, however, take out a ski instructor once, which was pretty funny. So, and all of my friends were there, so that was awesome. No, and they just laughed and laughed. We went through. I don't know what he was doing, but he was like holding my hands, and we're looking at my feet, and all of a sudden my brain like engaged, and I was like, he's looking at my feet, and I'm looking at my feet, and he's skating backward or skiing backwards. Who the hell's watching where we're going? Well, nobody was. So I looked up orange fence. We like went down the mountain through the fence, and he lands on top of me, like on like mating position.
Oh no.
And yeah, I just like, get off of me. And he just goes, that was the best wipe out of my life, man. And I was like, I'm literally gonna freak out if you don't get off me. My husband was at the top of the mountain. He was like, oh, I was with my friend. I was like, cool. That's great. I never want to go again.
Traumatized.
Yeah, trauma. More trauma. Mormon trauma, ski trauma, Utah trauma.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have listened to part one
Ooh,
and part two of
awesome.
your
Josh.
story on your podcast. And so anyone who hasn't listened, definitely go and listen to that.
Yes.
But make sure that you do stay here and listen to what she has to say. So I'm going to let you take the wheel.
All right. So should we start with my beginnings or the church's beginnings?
We'll go with yours, and then we'll
Okay.
get into the church there.
We'll get into the church. Okay. So I was born into the church. My parents were what you call Jack Mormons, which means like Catholics that go on Easter and Christmas. Like it's kind of like that. They don't really go, they do what they want. They still smoke and drink. You can't do any of that stuff when you're really actually Mormon. If you're practicing, and doing what you should be doing. So they never really went, but my neighbors went. And so they thought, oh, well, we should send them so they won't be heathens to church with these people, because the Mormons will always be like, oh, let us help you do this. Let us help you take your kids to church. Let us help you. They're very helpful people. And so honestly, and this is the disclaimer I always say, because most Mormon podcasts will not go into the things I'm going to get into here in a little while, because they say it's disrespectful or making fun of them for their like religious stuff they do. And here's the thing. I don't feel that way at all. The reason why I go into what I go into is not to make fun of anything. It is because I feel like I was victimized and lied to. And I feel like I shouldn't have to hide that. I feel like other people should know, so that if they're at the brink where they're like, oh, maybe I am going to go through the temple, because the Mormon church is pretty good until you go to the temple. And then things get weird. And so, but no one could talk about the temple until you go. It's like a rule. Not even your grandma will tell you what's going to happen in there. So you're just kind of thrown into it, and we'll get there. But I just want people to know that this is why I talk about what I do, because I still have family that are Mormon. I've listened to a lot of other Mormon podcast people that are, and I'm like, no, they don't beat their wives like ritualistically. What is she talking about? I mean, I like how to step back and go, no, this is crazy. Like some of them are probably do. Some of them probably don't. It's no different than Catholics or any other group. I mean, there's exactly bad apples. Yeah. So I hate, and my asthma's in rare form. So sorry about that. Pollen's high here. We got a nice sunny day. And so I just think that when people come on and try and make it more like, yes, I was beaten. My dad was an ass, my stepdad, but it wasn't because he was Mormon. Okay. That was just like not part of my story about Mormonism. So I want people to know, you know what, if it wasn't for my neighbor who was a Mormon, my mom might be dead. Like she literally helped save my mom multiple times. So it's not the people in the middle. It's no different than the government or the, powers that be in any other big thing, that's in the world, any big group, like we were talking politics or whatever, like lower, like city officials probably aren't that bad of people. But if you get up to the top, you're probably going to meet some not really straight arrows. Okay. So same thing with religion and any religion. So I feel like the normal people that are in this, like my family members or other people that I know here, because I still live in this state, which is like mostly Mormon. Like I have to hide this from my neighbors and sometimes my daughter will be like, oh, mom has a podcast. I'm like, no, don't tell your friends that, because then you can't come play. So yeah, I'm always like, oh, no. What did you tell her that for? But either way, whatever. I just like to get it out there that I don't think that of people. So we went with our nice neighbors who are very nice people and good people. And we were baptized into the church with my neighbor actually baptized me, because you have to be worthy to like baptize. So like my dad couldn't do it or anything. At 8 years old, you get baptized. The only difference between us and regular churches on the baptism is we don't get baptized for God. We get baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is what they say. And so even that, pulling that apart, and it's really indoctrinating the whole time, but you don't realize it because you're a kid. You just think, oh, this is just what you do. You go to testimony meetings once a month at the first Sunday of the month. And if you feel the spirit or your mom nudges you enough, you go up to the front and you say, I'd like to bear my testimony. And I know this church is true. Like everything's about the church. It's missing the God part. It's a lot, but you don't recognize it because they say the God part is the same as with, basically like that is the church is God. So don't worry about that. But that's really not true. They're talking a lot about, the church. And so little 4-year-olds will get up there and they're like, they say these little things. And I'm like, you don't even know what testimony means. No, there's no way, you're a kid, you're 4. And so
Right.
you get this stuff like, cause then everybody's like, oh, you did good. You're way to go, Johnny, So, I mean, it's indoctrinating that way, but it's not, I don't feel like that's harmful necessarily. It is in the long run, but like, overall, are they hurting anyone at that point? Not really. You
Mm-hmm.
get into a lot of things like later when you become a teenager that are weird. You start having bishop meetings because you can't go to the like dances. They have dances for the kids that are like you have to be 14 and you can't date till you're 16. So you kind of want to go to those dances because you're like, I can't do anything else. How am I ever going to meet a human?
Right.
So I mean, you have to go to these meetings with your bishop to like figure out if you're worthy to go. And so they ask you some really inappropriate questions like, do you masturbate? Weird stuff, like all kind, like, what do you do? Like, how do you do? And you're alone in that office with that person. And now reviewing it, I'm like, that was so messed up. But like at the time, I didn't feel victimized. At the time, I didn't feel weird about it. You just knew that's what it was. And you become a super good liar immediately because if you answer that question wrong, like one time and you get like that whole, like, she didn't go to the dance. I wonder why she didn't,
Mm-hmm.
it gets awkward. So you learn very quickly in Mormonism that perfection is what they're seeking, whether it's real or imagined, you become perfect. So it's a lot of pressure on people. I feel like this state is, I don't feel this is truth. I am a nurse. I've been a nurse 24 years. We see a lot of depression and suicide rates here. It has to correlate. I mean, that pressure is so much. And I had it a lot too, as a mom later on in my life. So anyway, back to teenage years. You're doing that. You hook up and go to these little like young women's, young men's. You guys sometimes do group activities. So the moms go to Relief Society, the dads go to their meeting. These are all on different days of the week. Then the kids go to their meeting, then the teenagers go to their meeting, then on Sunday all go to a meeting. So like
Mm-hmm.
you're busy all the time. And then once a month you have to go, visiting teaching to your neighbors and you have to go do this. I mean, there's a lot of have tos. Like if you're in the Mormon church, you do not lack for things to do. Like literally, you're just probably tired. I mean, and sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes for some people that like can help them pull them out of addictions or different things because you don't have time for any of that crap. You're busy. You're not having a beer for sure anyways, because it's against the rules. But even if you had time, you wouldn't have time. So um, and then as you get older, you get like 12. At 12 years old, you can get your first little taste of the temple and you can do baptisms for the dead. Now, remember, they're already baptized at 8 years old for themselves. So later, you're baptizing people by proxy because they're dead. And you can do up to 13 each. And you do this in a font, a baptismal font inside the temple. And you feel all special because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in the temple. Like there's even songs about the temple, like I'm going to get married in the temple one day. Like they really shove this down your throat. So you're like, wow, I'm made it in here. I lied enough that I'm perfect. I'm here. Great. And so you do these things for proxy, but you don't really even understand what that means. Like at 12 and 13, I don't think I did. you know.
So, is there a significance to why you're only allowed to do so many?
No, I think it's more like everybody's waiting to take their turn, so you gotta wrap it up,
Right. It's
whoever's in
funny that
front of
they
you.
chose the number 13.
Right, 13. Yes. And so that's a fun little thing. And that's why Mormons are so into genealogy
Oh,
because they have to get the names of all these dead people in their families so you can go and baptize them, right? And they even did like Hitler and Jews and all kinds of bad stuff. And I'm like, and when the Jewish people started getting baptized after they died in the Holocaust for what they believed, they were sued. They were definitely sued. And that
oh,
crap stopped. Yeah.
oh
And then
God.
so the Mormons don't really have the line where they're like, maybe we shouldn't do that because, it's probably not a good idea.
Right. It's not till
But
after the fact. You're like, in hindsight,
uh,
that was a bad idea, guys.
bad plan, Gina. They're like, oh, well, actually, it would be George because Gina's don't make those decisions. But you know what I'm saying. It would have been,
Right.
yeah, it's not good. So you do this whole proxy thing, but to you as a kid, you're like, yeah. And then we went with the young men and had ice cream. So that was cool. Like you really don't know what you're doing. And even if somebody breaks it down for you, I don't think you really get it. And so
Mm,
if you did, you're like probably thinking, why the hell are we baptizing dead people? What's going on with the dead people? I mean, like retrospect is everything. Whatever. Moving on with my life. You go forward from there. My family turbulence, it was just stupid. My whole life, like when I was a kid, is really a lot. And so I was my stepdad was rare form, just like to beat people. And my mom almost died. And then because she'd had so much problems with him, she had had suicide attempts. And then because of that, she drank too much and he drank too much and there was drugs involved and all this stuff. So basically we were taken away by the time I was 12, lived with my grandma. We moved away from Idaho and back to Utah. Well, Utah Mormons and Idaho Mormons, anywhere else in the whole, anywhere I would venture to state world, it's a lot different than Utah. With Utah being the Mecca, things are real serious here. Okay. Some places
hmm
you go, like Idaho was more relaxed. I feel like they were serious, but they weren't like serious. And so it was a big change. And I still stayed in the church. My grandma was very church centered, and none of her kids had made it through the temple. Is a big deal for her. She went through the temple alone because my grandpa was basically a hooligan until he was like 50 something. He was a one he was a one percenter. Do you know what that is? It's not good. So like a biker.
Okay, that's what I figured.
Yeah. Yeah. And my uncle was a sundowner. And so all these things, which is like Hell's Angels. But
Okay.
so all this stuff, her kids didn't really turn out like she thought they might and wanted them to. So she like put all her energy into like, this one's gonna make it. This kid is gonna make it. So she like did everything to make sure like I was going to church, I was doing what I needed to do, blah, blah, blah. And so even with boys, because I was super boy crazy early, she was like, I will straight up give you your grandpa's sports car if you graduate and you're a virgin. I didn't say, I never said that on another podcast, but that's true. And I was like, damn. And so it does like make it into your perspective. Like, is he really worth a car? Like,
Right.
yeah, needless to say, I wasn't with anyone until I got married, but I did get married at 17 like a moron. And so, but everybody was fine with it. Like I should have been at senior prom and I wasn't. I was getting married to a 25-year-old man. So I wasn't pregnant. I was just an idiot. And I thought this was a good idea because my grandparents got married at 14 and 16. So, I
Right.
mean, it
So
wasn't
like
wasn't a big
for
deal.
you guys it was just commonplace. You
Yeah.
don't know any
I was
different.
like, oh, yeah, it's fine. Totally fine. She does that. So I got married to this 25-year-old. I don't know. Now looking back on it, it's really awkward that he wanted to marry a 17-year-old. I'm like, Anyway,
Right.
yeah, a lot of things there. So we get really involved in the church together. And his parents have never forgiven me. I'm pretty sure because he was Roman Catholic and he was Irish, and you just like a Mick, like McKinney, McDonald, like he was a Mick. And so it was bad. And his family was upset. I mean, I get it now. Back then I was like, I don't know. He's doing way better now, which he was, because he was an addict for many years. And for him, it was like something to focus on, like good things to focus on. And that's why I say, I don't really, it's hard for me because it's satanic. So the church is like lies. If they came out and said, you know what, we are a group that just believes in blah, 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 and we're almost Freemasons and we're sort of satanic and Christ is going to be thrown out of this whole thing, I would stop this. Like I would stop talking about it. The fact that I was told that this was how you get to heaven and that this is the only way that God's going to love me, that pisses me off. Literally.
Right.
Like, so we start doing all these classes to go to the temple because he was a convert. So we couldn't get married in the temple at first because they have to wait a year because they have to make sure they're like, are you really sure you want to, do it?
Mm-hmm.
And so they make them wait, which is fine. Whatever. We did the classes and all the things. And we go through the temple when I'm pretty pregnant because like we'd been married like 2 and some change years by then. And so I'm like 9 months pregnant. And the first thing that happens to me as we go in there is they give me this. They don't do this anymore because straight up people sued them. They have you take off your clothes and they have you put on this poncho thing and it's open. It's like a poncho. It's like sides open. And you sit down on this cold bench in this little room and you're like waiting for somebody and you're like, what the hell is going on? And the bench is like sucky. The bench is like hard and it's not like anything else in there. I mean, it's like stone and you're kind of naked,
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, why is this so cold? Well, I found out later that's because that's an altar. I didn't know that. It doesn't really look like it because it's just a bench stone thing, but in the rear view mirror, I'm like, okay, yeah, I see it. Got it. And then they come in and they bless you. And now they only touch people's foreheads because there was so much controversy because they come in and they touch here and they touch like your navel and they bless your loins, which is like your, junk. And so they do it right above that. There's no sexual weirdness, none of that, but like, it's very uncomfortable. You're
Right.
very,
Very probably
you're
awkward too.
very uncomfortable. Yeah. And also, if you're in the Mormon church, that they're only people that can have the priesthood is men. Okay. Period. End of the story. So the men do the blessings, the men hold the priesthood, the men do the stuff. That's how it is. So this lady comes in, and here I am so indoctrinated. I'm like, wait a minute. I know I'm naked and everything. That's fine. Whatever. It's cold, but you can't give me a blessing because you're a lady. And that's all I cared about at that point. I'm like, looking back, I was like, what the heck? But yeah. And so this lady comes in and I'm like, but where's the guy? Because you don't have the priesthood. You clearly cannot do this. And she's like, oh, it's different in the temple. Of course it is. Of course it is. Everything. So there's washing and anointings that happen. And it's like symbolic with oil and stuff. But also, guess what? Masons do washing and anointings. Masons receive new underwear in their temple rites. And right after you're naked and do this stupid shit stuff, excuse me, you get new
You're fine.
underwear. I know. I try not. My own self. I'm like, because I am Christian and I'm fully love God, but I do slip a lot on the bad mouth. I was raised by truckers and bikers and I'm working on it. So anyway, then they come in and they get you all ready and you go into another room and it's like all painted like the Garden of Eden, and the men sit on one side and the women sit on the other, and they do this story. And if you're in a live version of this, then it's like a play, and if you're in non-live version, it's a movie, and it's all about how God created the world and all this stuff. And like, so eventually, they get to Adam and Eve, and then we're kind of representative of Adam and Eve. And then it's like, they have people come to an altar and they talk about like the devil coming in. And if you're in the play part, they took it out because too many people were like spooked out that like there was a devil that would come in dressed all in black and be all weird. Now it's just like, I guess they just say it like, oh, and then Lucifer came. I don't know what they do now because I don't go anymore, thank heavens. So still, Lucifer has a huge part of this whole thing. So the people are reenacting this with it, as far as like they'll tell you, okay, Adam got, out into the lone and dreary world, and he's praying and he's calling out they used to say Pele El, which means, oh, hear me, false God. But people got smart and they started, so now they say, oh, hear me, God, hear the words of my mouth. And so then all of a sudden, God doesn't come, Lucifer does. Lucifer shows up and he says, oh, God's going to know you're naked. You better put this apron on. Okay. Why did Lucifer answer the prayer? Why did Lucifer answer the prayer when he was praying? And that was always weird. Like somebody brought that up in one of my other ones, and I was like, oh, I didn't catch that. And then he says, you better get this apron. And we get the apron and we put it on because he gave it to us. Then everybody stands up and they put on their fig leaf apron. They put on this green apron. It's the only thing of color in the whole thing. It used to be really a Masonic apron with like checkers and like the sun and all kinds of Masonic stuff. But they, of course, changed that in the 1960s. And I remember my great grandma was like, such a shame. Those were so much cuter. Yeah, you look at them and it's like, oh, sheesh, I know why. Like it's like the sundial and like up above the checkered floor and like all kinds of Mason crap. So I mean, I see why they changed them. Like probably
Right. I really love
yeah.
the red upside down star, the circle on the back side of it
Yeah.
too.
It was so bad. And so she's like, oh, we just have these green ones now. And I'm like, yeah. So you're sitting there, just put yourself, you've already been naked. You got these weird underwear now, by the way. They look like a full t-shirt for a girl, like maybe a little bit like of a cap sleeve right there. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like a t-shirt. And then also long, like underwear, like men's boxer briefs for
Okay.
women. And they have symbols on them. They have a compass and a square on each nipple. They have a ruler that goes sideways over your navel. And they have another ruler on your knee where your knee would like be on the ground if you kneeled. And you have to wear these for all your life. You have to wear them. I mean, obviously, different pairs, like they're your underwear now. Funny enough, the church is who makes them. Funny enough, you can't buy them anywhere else. Funny enough, they cost like $40 a pair. And I've seen, and I can't prove this, and I don't like saying things that I can't prove, so I'm just going to say I can't prove it. I've seen pictures of kids making them in sweatshops, so I don't think their overhead is high. um yeah, and so you go get these underwear, and you can't even buy the underwear. Like if you went in, you try to buy someone, they would say, I need to see your recommend there, and you can't even fake it. It's all digital. They're no dummies. They got like top of the line crap. Like they're smart. And so you have all that stuff. So you've got your weird underwear on. You can't even put your bra underneath. You have to put your bra over the top. Everything, even if you wear regular underwear, it has to go over the top. So can you even imagine the situation this is? Like very pregnant, and then like postpartum situations, monthly
Mm.
situations for girls, boxer shorts, they don't fit like underwear. Okay. It's
No.
not a thing. So probably the most miserable years of my life spent in those. Not the reason why I left the church. People would be like, oh, that's why she left. She didn't like the garments. No, that's not why. I'm just saying it was very uncomfortable. And I'm hot all the time because I don't have a thyroid, because I had cancer. And so you have to wear those underneath your clothing, and you cannot wear anything that would show them. So no more tank tops, no more cute tank top summer dresses, no more short dresses. Everything's to the knee. Like this is why they're very modest. And it used to be like, if you go back to the olden days, to the wrist, they were like to the wrist and to the ankle. And the FLDS, which are like the polygamists, they still do that. They go by
Right.
the letter of the law. And that's why they look so Little House on the Prairie, because I mean, they have to cover all that.
So what's
And
the difference
so,
between them and then
and
the Temple
us.
Mormons?
So they have their own temple as well. There's three branches. Well, there's probably more, but there's three main branches that split off after Joseph Smith died. He had the main branch of the LDS people that came here and settled in Salt Lake, and Brigham Young took over that whole thing. They were still polygamous then, everything like that, but like that became the mainstream church for the most part. Then there was like a big uproar. I can't remember which prophet. They didn't think it was the right prophet, whatever. And so they went their own way because they were changing the Book of Mormon. And that is true. That Book of Mormon has been changed more times than probably I change underwear. Like it is been fixed and changed. And if anything, like how I told you, oh, they don't do that anymore. Oh, they don't do this anymore. Blah, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah. This happens all the time because people get offended. And so those people that dress like Little House on the Prairie, the FLDS, they actually practice real Mormonism. They are probably the only people that practice real Mormonism. They did not ever change the Book of Mormon. They don't bend to meet Kool-Aid hair people. Okay. They just don't. They stick to what it says, and that's what they do. And so I almost have some sort of like props to them other than the pedophilia. Like they like to have little child brides that are 12. So that's not okay.
Yep.
So I'm like, you know what? If they want to have 20 wives and everybody's in agreements and they're over 18, I don't really care. You know what I mean? Like if
Mm-hmm.
that's their choice. I also think they're very indoctrinated, and I know what they do to them because I lived in that area for a long time. I lived in St. George, and they live in Colorado City, which is very close. And we would see them and they indoctrinate them so bad that very few people leave because they feel like they really will go to hell. And their husbands oftentimes keep their children, and their children do not belong to them. It's really hard. They have their own government, they have their own people out there. Like, I mean, it's serious. And so that's the FLDS. The mainstream LDS is the people you see come knocking on your door. The more, I want to say normie, they're normie Mormons. Like that's the normie Mormons. And they practice just the mainstream Mormonism. And then there's the reorganized church, which branched off after the death of Joseph Smith because his wife, Emma, hated polygamy and thought it was crap. And her son started that. So she was like, yeah, we can't, I believe in this, but we're not doing that. we're
Mm-hmm.
we're cutting that out. And I don't blame her at all. There's
Right.
no way. I actually We're not done with the temple part, but I will tell you this. I've said it on a couple. I actually lost my husband to a polygamist. So it's funny now. It wasn't funny. It was not funny when it happened. I kicked her
Right.
butt. Um, I did. I almost went to jail. Um,
Ah,
I know I shouldn't condone violence, but like sometimes people deserve violence because she knew that we
here,
were
here.
trying. Right. Yeah. She knew. I gave her a chance. Look, I'm willing to give anybody a chance. I came to her woman to woman and said, knock it off. I know what you're doing. I'm going to call your husband. And I know he hits you. So you better cut it out because I will blow your life up. Thank you. Stop it. She was considered defective because she lost her uterus after her first child, and she was the youngest wife. When you're the youngest wife, your duty is to have more babies. So
Mm-hmm.
she was considered to be like defective, and she probably felt really horrible about it. She was still really young. She was like 23. And so I just told her, look, we're trying to work out our crap, whatever. Leave him alone. That was his secretary at his job. And she didn't leave it alone. And I told her, if I ever catch you doing that again, I will get a hold of your husband. And sure enough, I caught him again one time, and I grabbed the phone and I was like, hello, can I please speak to whatever his name was? I can't remember. And then she's like, oh, who's calling? And I was like, blah, blah, blah from construction company. Cause I knew he did construction. And I was like, oh, it's about this bid. And then I was like, yeah, no, and I just told him, like, your wife is sleeping with my husband. This is what's happening. Blah, blah, blah. This is my name. This is his name. Bye. And I could hear her screaming before I hung up the phone. So yeah, I was like, sorry,
Damn.
sorry, not sorry. You should leave married people alone.
Right.
And that wasn't even, I had already got to her before that. Like, and yeah, it was bad. I didn't go to jail because it was my friend's brother that came. He was the cop. And actually, I feel like the boss, like low key, was like, he walked in and saw us fighting, and he turned around and walked out. And I was like, everybody knows you deserve this. Everybody know. I mean, I wasn't trying to kill her. I was just trying to slap her around a little. I was
Right.
mad. I was really pissed. And so eventually, whatever, that that's that. But so we'll go back to the temple. We're still in the temple because we're not even close to done. That's just I'm a tangent person. I'll go
You're
off
fine.
on, yeah. It's how my brain works. ADHD at
Same.
its finest. Yeah.
Same. And then I'll catch myself where I'm just like, I start talking and I'm like, I'm getting really chatty Cathy because I'm like completely baked out of my gourd and
80.
I'm just like blah 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 blah
Yeah.
blah blah. And then I'm like, oh God, I gotta pick it back up, get it back together.
Yeah. Well, and I have organized, I think, ADHD. Like most of the time I can hone in, but if there's like a little tangent thing, then I'm like, well, I gotta tell it now because I'll forget it later. So
Right,
that's why
exactly.
tangent. Yeah. So we're still in the temple, and you lean over these well, first you finish your little ceremony. This is called your endowment session. You're getting endowed. And that's kind of funny in a way, but anyway, because maybe some people aren't endowed. So that, no wonder they called it that, right?
Right.
Because it's a very male-centered freaking play thing. So then you're learning about all the signs and symbols that you need to get through to go to heaven. So they're handshakes, and they're basically Masonic handshakes. That they're 100% like the same. Like one of them is called the true grip of the lion paw or something, and he just changed the name, the true grip of the true sign of the nail. And so he just changes the name of these, and I'll explain why, but I don't want to tangent again. So I don't know. It's hard to like keep it because this whole story is just all, and so yeah, keep that in your back pocket. So we're going through that, and then they start doing this weird chanting, and they're bringing their arms to the square, which is very Masonic. And back in the 80s, they used, and all before the 80s, like it wasn't just the 80s, anytime before the 80s, like early 90s, they used to swear to slit their throat or slit their belly, just like the Gnostic Mass, if they ever spoke of it, like what I'm doing right now. And
Oh.
yeah. Yeah. And actually, New York Patriot, shout out to New York Patriot. He's amazing. He told me that at my last interview. I actually just posted that today, and I was like,
Yeah, I saw that.
that's creepy. That's weird that they do the same sorts of things. I mean, because Gnostic shouldn't have anything to do with Joseph Smith. Like I understood the Masons because he was a Mason, but the Gnostic Mass, like for the OTO, where'd that come from? Like what? So
Right.
yeah, satanic stuff. I was like, oh great, I did that. So and, and then they do this weird they do a book, and this is important, and I do this on every podcast I do. If somebody that's Mormon comes to you because you're having a hard time or whatever and says, oh, do you want me to put your name on the temple list, that say no. That is a book that they put all the names for the prayer requests in there. Okay. Now it's a computer now. They just print it off and put it in a book. But then they go and start chanting around this book. Like you wouldn't even believe. It's so creepy. And they're like saying stuff and chanting at the same time and saying like, oh God, hear the words of my mouth stuff, which remember who answered when they said that? It wasn't God.
Right. The devil.
So yeah. So I'm like, I tell everyone like, well, you can do what you want. If you want your name on that book, knock yourself out. But if you're trying to get rid of weird stuff in your life, I probably wouldn't do that if I were you. Like people say that to me all the time because I'm in Utah, and it's a normal thing to say to somebody, like if you're sick or had surgery. And I'm always like, oh, no, 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 no. Don't do that. Don't do that for me, please. Thank you.
Right.
Anyways, I mean, you can pray for me normal. Just you do it. Just you. That's great. Because it's, yeah. So you get done with that, and then you proceed forward. And this is like a really condensed. I mean, this ceremony takes 2 hours. So if I sat here and told you word for word, we'd be here a long time. So this is the very condensed version of an endowment session. So then you go on to the next room, which is a fake veil. It's curtains. and you can't see behind it. And there's holes in the curtain. So they stick their hand through, and you have to do the secret handshakes, and you get a new name, and you tell them your new name, which also Masons get a new name, and Masons do the handshakes. And your husband goes first because God calls him by his new name, and he is never to repeat it. Never. Like, not to, he can never tell me, no matter what, no matter what. And that's because he's going to be called in heaven by God by that name, by this new name. And then I get called by my new name from my husband, right? Because he's my God, right?
Right.
I also thought, like, oh my gosh, I have this coolest special name. It's just for me. Like, Gina over there. I guess I like Gina today. Gina over there doesn't have the same name as me. So I found out later, I was like, oh, I forgot my name. Crap. And so you call, and they're like, what day did you go through? And then you tell them, and they're like, oh, don't worry, it's this, because everybody's name's the same on that day. Everybody got the same name.
Damn.
I know, I was mad. I was like, wow, okay. Here you think it's like a special thing from God, and you just find out, like, oh, let me check that. Okay, no. So,
Right.
yeah.
This is a Thursday. Okay, you're
Yep.
Aaron.
Yep. And so I was Abigail. You're not supposed to say that ever, but
Whoopsies.
I don't believe in this stuff anymore. And I think that it's good to just put it out, because it isn't part of my life, and I'm not going to accept it. So this is why I do this. And so then you do the little secret handshakes. These are to pass the sentinels and angels that protect God, so that you can get through to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know them, and if you forget them, then I guess you don't go to heaven. So you have to go back. Then you go through into this beautiful celestial room, which is supposed to be like heaven. And you can sit there and talk or whatever, but you're kind of done with that part. And so basically you made it to heaven, you know? And I remember thinking, like, that sucks. I mean, we have these new secret things, and I've never had a secret between me and my husband. Like, at that point, obviously he had a lot later, but at that point I was like, that's weird. And then also, like, God calls him, but not me. Like, it's a weird situation. So then you go to get married in the temple, which you would think, like, in your wedding dress and your family. And I do. No. You wear the same outfit that you wear with your fig leaf apron and your little white, very plain clothing. They don't want big poofy dress. They don't want any of that stuff. If you do wear your wedding dress, you have to wear this stuff over the top. So you still wear the fig leaf, like the little robe, all the things. So and you've got the magical underwear on, and then you've got your wedding dress, and then you've got the robe, and then you've got, all this. Oh, the veil, because we used to have to veil our faces because we weren't worthy to see the priesthood stuff because we were women. So you got all this stuff on, and you go to an altar, and no one can come that is not worthy to be there. If they don't have a temple recommend, they don't get to come to your wedding. Sorry. And they don't care if it's your mom. You don't get to go. No, they make no exceptions. Zero.
What's the criteria for that then?
You have to be Mormon. You have to have gone through the temple, which, remember, if you're a convert, it takes a year. Like, it's not like you can be like, oh, I have 3 months till a wedding and I can just go do this. No, none of that. It's going to take time. And so pay all your tithing, 10% tithing, be morally clean. I'm not saying the rules are bad. Like, some of them are good. Some of those rules are like, okay, that I can understand. Yeah, people have addictions, people have this. Like, I get it. You aren't supposed to smoke, drink. Okay, a lot of people get this twisted. They think you're not supposed to have caffeine. That's not true. Coca-Cola is owned by the Mormons, and we drink Coke. Okay. It's the fact that back then they used to say no hot drinks, and the only hot drinks back then were coffee and tea. Well, so they just have shortened it to coffee and tea. And then when I asked somebody about it that was higher up, because I was like, what's the deal with the coffee and tea? Like, it's so weird, because Coke is bad for you too, or whatever. Right. And they're like, oh, it's the tannic acid in there and blah, blah. Like Joseph Smith knew about this, right? No, it's probably like a shortage of it. They just didn't want to hear people complaining that they didn't have it anymore, whatever. I get it. Right. You're not supposed to be addicted to anything. They really push, like, Don't be addicted to, even Coke. Don't be addicted to anything. Don't tattoo your body. Your body is a temple. But every girl I've ever known in the Mormon church has a boob job. So that's fine. But yeah, it's just like, it's like the Kardashians in modesty. Like, it's very strange. And so everything like that, it's all good for you. I get it. You have to go to church a lot. You have to, when I say pay 10% of your earnings, I mean, after you get your W-2s and you do your taxes, you have to take your taxes in and meet with the bishop and show them all your financials. Like, this is not a joke. And if you're negative, you owe the church money. And then on top of it, if you don't have the money, because sometimes people are like, well, it's either I have gas and stuff for food and money for food, like, or I pay you, and they're like, oh, we'll give you food, pay the tithing. Well, it's a double end, like, good for them, because then they're giving charity by giving them food, because they own their own warehouses. They do all that. They have canned everything. And so, like, meats processed by the church, flour processed by the church, like everything. They are very self-sustained on their welfare program. And so they'll give you that, but they'll take your money. So still, it's a charitable donation that's not taxed. And they gave you a charitable donation that's not taxed. So it's a win-win,
Right.
And sometimes you end up with a crappy job, because if you didn't do what you needed to do, then, like, one time we owed money and we had to be janitors for the church and, like, scrub toilets and stuff. Like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying there's not other churches that probably do that. Maybe there is, like, maybe people volunteer for that or whatever, but everybody has a calling. So, like, some people get called to be like the teacher for the little 5-year-olds and they don't want to. Like, my grandma got that calling and she was like, I don't want to teach little kids. I don't like little kids that much. Like, they're cute and all, but I raised my kids.
But fuck them kids, bro.
Yeah, she was like, I don't want to do that. And you have to do it unless you have a really good reason not to do it. And they give everybody a calling. So everybody in the church helps run the church, because then you're helping. Like, you don't get paid for any of this. Like, the bishop over, like, the church, which would be like a local priest, he takes on everything for all of the whole church and does these interviews and all this stuff. And he's literally at the church 24 hours a day, basically, for a long time. I mean, he goes to work and then goes to the church, and they do it all for free. And this all runs itself. Like, and it's all free. And so it's kind of ingenious in a way. Like, even their library. Oh, the librarians, it's her calling. That's what God told her to do.
And they're still raking in money and still raking in money and still raking. Yeah. That's so similar to, like, Scientology.
It's fair. I think so too. And the only thing that's different is they don't rule over your life with, like, you can't ever get married if you join the Sea Org. But they're more like, yeah, you can do whatever you want, but then we want you here to report when we tell you to. It's a little bit more free, but it's still very controlled. It's still very controlled. I think it's like Scientology and the Jehovah's Witnesses had a baby. That's how I feel. I mean, that, like, the way they run it.
I can see that.
Mm-hmm. And so, that's fine. Whatever. They can do whatever they want as a church. If they don't bring God into it, that's where I get upset. Like, if you want to say you're the church of Masons, whatever, because that's what you're doing, then do that, and I will respect it. But you're lying to people. You're telling them they can't go to the top heaven if they don't do these, things. So here you are getting married and you're leaning over an altar. So the altar is like sideways and he is kneeling, and I'm kneeling, and you're holding hands over this altar. And some things that are dark, and then they have infinity mirrors. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like, all the way down this whole way. And so you look into the infinity mirrors and you're like, I'm going to be with you for time and all eternity. And what does God say in the Bible? No, that's not a thing. It says there is no marriage in heaven. There is no male or female in heaven. You will be as the angels. The angels don't have wives. That's why they freaking came down here and got in deep crap with God. they're not supposed to procreate, they're not supposed to have sex, they're not supposed to be married. That's the whole point of the angel story of why they got in trouble. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm like, all right, whatever. You really believe that. And I feel like that in itself was so powerful. And I think he got this part. Now I'll get into what I think about what happened with him, but that particular piece, he saw his wife lose a lot of children and he saw his mother lose children. And I'm sure he saw the heartbreak in them. And I think it was maybe like this will help, maybe this will help, and then
Mm-hmm.
look at how wonderful it works. If you go talk to somebody that's lost their child and you're like, you will be with them in heaven if you do these things, people are going to do the things, that's
Right.
very powerful. That's like, because my mom lost my brother, and if she didn't know all the things that we do know, that would have worked with her. She would have done almost anything. It's so horrible for them, and
Right.
I can't.
Especially
Yeah,
a state where you're so vulnerable.
way and in these other countries, they love now to focus on these countries where they're a little bit behind, like in Latin America or Africa, and then they don't hear anything else and they think, oh, this is wonderful because these people help. Remember, they help take care of you, they help you with a lot of things. You feel very inclusive, you feel very it's camaraderie, you feel like you have, like, if I needed to move tomorrow and I had no help, I could call the bishopric and I would say, I really need help. Oh, can you send men? Oh, yep. Here would be a bunch of strangers that I don't even really know that well that are my neighbors that were called by the bishop. You need to go help Sister Anderson. And so, or like, I have a baby, everybody bakes casseroles for this lady and helps her out. Somebody
Mm-hmm.
comes and does laundry or whatever. I'm not saying there's not perks. There's perks. Just like in the Masons or anything. I mean, there's perks. Yeah, of course. Why would you even do it if not? You know?
Right.
And so I'm very wiggly also because I have a bad back. So sorry about
You're fine.
that. So, anyways, they have you look into the infinity mirrors. They don't have you do like the I do's. It's very different. He basically says his own prayer over you, and they have their own set stuff they say, which I've tried to block out, but it's basic. I mean, just the time and all eternity thing. And so after that time, a woman is sealed to that one man for time and all eternity. The man, however, because of polygamy, can marry. If we get a divorce, you can get married tomorrow. That really doesn't matter. If I want to get married in the temple again tomorrow, in the temple, not regular, in the temple. If I want to have another temple marriage because my husband died, say he died, like it's a legit thing, like I can't control that. And I meet somebody and I want to do that, if my bishop has to approve it. If my husband is alive and it is a divorce, my ex-husband has to approve it. So he could be a real douche and just be like, yeah, I'm not signing that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. And that has happened many times, because then you have to go through a whole board and like a hearing, and like it's like a whole big thing. And so any children that are born underneath that covenant of marriage, they say underneath the covenant, are automatically covered. So like I had another son and me and that husband were talking about going through the temple. And I said, well, what about my son? We need to get a recommend for my son so that he can be sealed to us, like as a family forever. This is what they push. And the guy kind of, you could tell he wasn't super comfy. He goes, no, you don't. And I'm like, what do you mean I don't? And he's like, well, he was born under the covenant. I'm like, yeah, to my ex-husband, who's a weirdo person that's on meth and not living it at all. What are you talking about? And my husband is like, he's a redhead back then. And he was turning red everywhere, like literally from head to toe, he was red, I think, at this point. Because remember, this man is raising my other children that were the other man's children, and he just took off. So he's like, are you trying to tell me my son is already covered because her ex-husband? And he's like, well, it'll all be fine, it'll be switched when you guys go through. And I was like, my husband at the time, he was like, yeah, we're done. I'm not doing this, like, at all. Like, that's insane. That's crazy. I don't even know. And he was like so upset. He was already sketchy about it. And that just was, that was it. That was like the straw, you know?
Right. No
And
kidding.
so, yeah, he just had it. I mean, he wasn't super, he kind of was doing it for me anyways. And so I was like, yeah, that would make me mad. Like, I understood his position and I respected it, which actually saved me probably another good 15 years. Cause if I had gone back then, I don't know if I'd ever have got out. I don't know. I don't know. It would have been hard. It would have been way harder. So I ended up, we were married for a good 10 years before Little Miss Polygamous came into the picture. And we had a rocky road because he had mental illness, which I don't blame him for that. I also, he told me, he disclosed it. I was 17. I was like, yeah, you take your pill, right? Like, it's fine, totally fine. And he's like, yeah, but sometimes it's really bad. And I like would just got out of alcohol rehab from like being locked down, like, because the military threw me in there because I showed up to work drunk. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not good, but doesn't have a car, divorced, like has a kid. I'm like, well, used to be on meth, like all this stuff. So, but I'm a kid and I'm like, yeah, I love you. It's totally fine. You know, just take your pill. And I was so delusional. I look back at that and I'm like, okay, yeah, great. So we get divorced. He goes completely off the deep end, like, because the girl didn't leave her husband and I wasn't going to take him back after he did that. So, I mean, twice. Like, I did take him back once, but like twice is twice too many. It's just ridiculous. And so I was like, no. So when he figured out, he was just kind of, oh, I'm on an island alone now. That sucks. He kind of went off the deep end. And I do feel bad about that because not that I caused it or could do anything about it, but the fact that it happened, I mean, I'm obviously, I feel bad for anybody in that situation. Hopefully you guys can't hear my dog yelling at me through the door. Can you hear it?
Yeah, it's okay though.
Ugh. Well, he's going to be naughty for a minute.
The other night, I started recording, and then I realized my cat was in the room with me and was wanting out.
He's usually, well, I'm his master, so he's always like, Mom, Mommy. Yeah, he's huge. He shouldn't need a mommy, but he needs his mommy.
Right.
So yeah, it's one of those things. But so he does have a really rough go of it. And like I said, I'm not heartless. Like, that was horrible. Like, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. You know, I mean, it was sad and yucky. And yeah. So he goes off the deep end. I get remarried and I'm still 100% all about the church. Like, and my family is, my grandma is. And I remember after I went through the temple, I said, Grandma, what the hell were we doing? What the hell was that? You know, somebody could have told me. She's like, oh, we can't tell. Da, 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 da. I'm like, yeah, but that was a lot. Like, that was, and she just looked at me and she's like, you'll get used to it. And that was my answer. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to get used to it, you know? And I never did. So after you go through for yourself, here comes the dead people again. You go through for dead people after that. Every time you go through after the first time, you do it for dead people. Because Mormons believe there's 3 heavens and then there's like this waiting area. So there's the celestial kingdom, and then there's the telestial kingdom, and then there's the terrestrial kingdom. And they're all different kingdoms depending on how good you were here. And even if you were the best of the best of the best and you didn't go to the temple, you can't go live with God because you aren't good enough. So, yeah. So these other people that were like good, because I used to say things like, well, what about Mother Teresa, or like really good people, you know, like not necessarily. I mean, that's also, we don't want to go conspiratorial on Mother Teresa, but there could be things with people, but you get what I'm saying? Like, the best people that lived their life the best they could and were really good people. And she's like, oh, well, they're waiting in heaven for you to go do this work so that they can go to the bigger heaven and live with God. And I'm like, okay. So it was so creepy for me that, and then you practice the handshakes and all the things. So it helps put it in your brain, you know?
Right.
And so that you can remember it for when you die. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that one. So you can also do marriages for them, for people, the dead people, and do that sealing with the mirrors, like I said. And I usually would gear toward that because the other thing just creeped me out a lot. I was like, the marriages don't seem so bad. We'll just go there, do that.
Right.
And so we did that for quite some time, and we were really active for quite some time and did all the things, like I said, really into the church. My grandma was super happy, and my grandma raised me. So there was this huge heaviness on me because even my grandpa eventually came around and went through the temple with my grandma. And he was old when he went through. I think he was in his fifth, like I say old for him. 50s is not old anymore. But for him, he only lived till he was 63. So that was old for him because he was almost dead.
Right.
So he didn't obviously know that was going to happen, but he went through and they did that and he got really involved in it. But even he told me once, he said, he was raised Catholic and he said, I still believe in the Trinity. And I was like, oh, yeah. And he's like, yeah, I don't know about the whole, because they don't. They believe God is the Father, Jesus is the Son, and the Holy Ghost is somebody completely different. And so Jesus was here. He was born of flesh like a man. Like they believe that, like, basically, like God had sex with Mary. Like, really.
Right.
Yeah. Not like just divine, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
that was something else that Mormons believe that most people do not believe. And then so yeah, that's another weird thing that they believe. So I was very into that, and then my grandpa dies. And then after my grandpa died, I felt so responsible for my grandma because I mean, he died so young and it sucked and it was rapid. It was cancer. I think we only had like 3 weeks to figure everything out and it was just so bad. And so then she had lost a son. She had had all this bad stuff happen and it was all really bad. You know, she had a really hard end of her life there. And so I felt like this heavy burden on me to be like, you can't go mess everything up for her. Like, that's really sad. So I kept I took my girls to church. I did the whole church thing. Even if my husband that said, no, I'm not going to go through, even if he didn't go, we would go quite often. And
Mm-hmm.
even if I didn't go, my girls would go with my grandma. And so when I left the church, basically I lost most of my family. My grandma didn't only become a little insane. She called CPS. She said, I beat my kids. She tried to take my kids away. I've never beat my kids. I've yelled at my kids. And I mean, like, I feel bad about how I was about the yelling now, but like, yeah, it was not like I didn't beat my kids. And
Right.
so CPS got called. That case was dropped. It was so silly. I mean, but my daughter ended up living with her for a short time and she just wanted what she wanted. She was 17.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of my family at that point alienated me and dropped me. And when my grandma couldn't keep my kid, she sued me for every penny she ever spent on my kids. All the school clothes, every trip to Disneyland that I specifically said, you do not have the money for this. Do not buy Disneyland tickets. And she went and told my kids that they were going to Disneyland on Christmas morning. So what do you do with that?
You're
You
no
know?
kidding.
And so I'm like, no, my husband has to work and everything. It's not going to work, blah, blah, blah. She bought him a ticket to come back, to like ride home on an airplane, everything. She made it happen. And I was like, this is just not good. Cause I knew she was elderly. I knew she didn't have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so that ended up breaking what little pieces of family I had left basically off, other than my mom. My mom had already left the church and became a non-denominational Christian. And they were so mean about it. Like, oh, you go into your rock and roll Jesus church today, and like really rude stuff. And Mormons are like that. They are like really snarky that way. Like, I remember one time one of our kids was getting baptized and I was like, we should invite other people in the family. And my husband's like, don't, because his family's really LDS. And I remember saying to them, Well, she's getting baptized, on Sunday. And they looked at me and said, baptized to what? And I was like, God. And they were
Right.
like, oh, because they get baptized to the church. So,
Right.
yeah. So that's basically my life kind of in a nutshell for that. After that, I left. I found my own way. I definitely found God. It took a long time to get some of these curses off of me. And I don't still feel they're 100% gone. Like even in my ancestry DNA profile, it says Mormon settler. I mean, like it's deep. It's deep in my stuff. Like my family names are high up. My people are high up. And it's just one of those things you have to deal with constantly. I don't think that it ever fully goes away. I think you have to just keep fighting it. I don't know.
Right. So
So
then what are you believing? What do you believe now? So
I just only believe in the Bible and I believe in the Trinity. And I don't believe in man. I don't believe in any church. I don't believe, I mean, do I think you could go to a church that's non-denominational and worship with others and have a nice time and have a good service? Sure. I'll never belong to another church. Like belong. Like I am a patron of this church, period, because I belong to God. I don't belong to a man. I don't belong to any of that crap. He doesn't live in buildings. He tells us this. If I
mhm,
want to talk to God, I talk to God. There should be nothing between you and God, period. Like it's not meant to be that way. And I think the people that don't feel that feel really alienated sometimes by religion and never feel the whole thing, which is so sad. And in Mormonism, the grace card is so not there. Like they're very hard on people.
right.
They
And I was Catholic. I was born and raised into the church, and I stopped
sorry.
going when I was 18. And
Huh.
I just, there was things to me that I wasn't about it. It just
Yep.
it didn't suit me. I knew that things just was like I don't feel it. So like because of that, I end up having, problems for, some time with, faith and spirituality and things like that. So I'm sitting here and I'm just like, it wasn't until recently when I'm starting to like come across that, okay, all this stuff that I started believing with the metaphysical and stuff like that, and it's like it all connects
Oh yeah.
every single bit of it. Like I can sit here with my pendulum and do pendulum work, and it's not some demonic satanic thing that I'm doing, and I can still sit here and believe in God and be able to be a good person and and love everybody in the world and all this stuff, but still have these ties that a lot of people would consider bad.
Well, and I think that the biggest thing as a Christian is, and this, I've got a lot of slack on this because I interviewed with a lady that was like an oracle, and people really gave me crap for it. They were like, "Well, you," and some of the up and coming things I want to do are going to be poo pooed because I want to talk to specific people about John D. Well, you can't go talk to too many Christians that know that much about John D. They just don't. You've got to dig into the occult world to get that knowledge. And that is what it is. I don't think that that necessarily makes anyone a bad person. I don't think Mormons are a bad person. I don't think Masons are a bad person. I don't think there's a lot of people that are involved in things that you could probably even maybe be a Satanist and not be the worst person. I think they make you do more things and oaths, but here's the problem. And herein lies the problem. It's none of my business to judge anyone else. Whatever they're doing, whatever they want to do, that is their journey. And all I can do is say, this is what I do. This is what I believe. This is what I'll share with you. But you should never do like a whole bunch of pointing because you don't know. Like I did the pointing as a Mormon and I was doing satanic stuff that I didn't know. So then what? So then what?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the biggest message for a Christian should be about love because Jesus said that on the cross everything was hung. Everything was hung on the cross, and to love your neighbor as he would love us, like to be loving to each other. And that is so important that people just don't get it. Now, I 100% believe in the Bible. I don't cherry pick it, even to flat earth. That's what got me kind of weird into that, because there's a lot of biblical references to flat earth. But I'll tell you
There's a
this,
lot of
like,
biblical references, all sorts of wild stuff. I mean,
for
you can
sure.
go giants,
Oh, they
aliens, and
that's real.
UFOs. I
The
mean,
giants are real. Yeah.
right. I
Well,
mean, there's all these different things. And I even ran across a TikTok video today that just kind of was like, man, this is such a really good point. And it was talking about how in like all these old depictions of things, and they start showing one thing in particular all the time, dragons.
mm-hmm. Yep.
And at one point in time it became to where there's like, oh, this is a mythical creature and all this stuff, but then there's all these paintings, all these drawings, and all
Mm-hmm.
these things, and it's like, okay, well, maybe that's not the case. Maybe this wasn't, and these people were just
Mm-hmm.
painting and drawing what they were seeing. And
Yeah.
it,
Who knows?
and now these are
Yeah.
just some sort of extinct creature that just is no longer here.
Well, it's so representative of, like, even if you go to the whole dinosaur thing, which I don't even know how I feel 100% about that. But if it was in existence, then that would explain it. The bones that they find, the things that they find, like sometimes you think, maybe that was part of that, but we'll never know. You know what? History is made by the winners. History is made by whoever won. They wrote the book. That's what you get.
That's
It's
why it's
not,
his
yeah.
story.
Yeah. It's not going to be like what people think, but I know this with biblical stuff, there is actual Dead Sea Scrolls that back it up. And that's why I'm like, okay, where's the Mormons' Dead Sea Scrolls? They don't have them. Where's the Mormons' plates that they had? Oh, conveniently, the angel needed to take them back to heaven. So that's where they are. And that's what happened with that. So anything that they have, like, there supposedly was this huge battle out where he found the plates and all these tons of people died, that it was worse than any war ever. Where's the skeletons? Where's the
Mm-hmm.
people? Like, there's nothing. I mean, you can go dig up World War II areas and, there's going to be dead people where they say so. Or anywhere where they say where wars are, whatever, you can go look that up. There's going to be proof. There's going to be arrowheads that proof of Indian, reservations or whatever back in the day, not reservations, but colonies or whatever. They have no proof of anything. And that's, it speaks volumes. And they've had some pretty good sized controversies on different things like that. And it's interesting, but I think that overall giants, it's funny you bring that up. I think that Joseph Smith, and a lot of people will say this is like a hallucination. He was doing mushrooms or whatever. I don't think so, because a hallucination goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And this went on for years for him. So when he was young, his mom literally put out after his death in a biography that they were a part of the House of Abrak. Well, Abraxas is a demon and it's a necromancer. So how funny that most of their stuff has to deal with death. I mean, you're doing these things for people that are dead. You're never doing anything for the live people except for once in their life. But you can go back 30 times a year for dead people. What kind of energy is being created there and why? Because this is all about necromancy to me. And he saw an apparition. He thought it was God the Father and the Son. Okay, that's great. So did John D. John D saw an angel and he told him to do what? Write a book, right? We get the
Mm-hmm.
Enochian alphabet from it. And what happened with the Enochian alphabet? It started a whole bunch of religions. Well, okay, let's go to Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard out in the desert. What did they see? They saw an angel. And what did it do? It told them to write a book. And what happened after that? It started a religion. And now there's a religion. What did Muhammad see? Muhammad saw an angel. And what happened after that? He wrote a book. And what happened after that? He has a religion. Okay, let's have a fun one. Let's mix it up a little. What did Aleister Crowley see? He didn't see an angel, but he saw Awas, which was an alien. Now, he was a much darker person, so maybe the angel was able to come however it really looked, because it knew it wouldn't scare him. What's the
Mm-hmm.
first thing it says in the Bible when angels come down to people? Do not be afraid, because they're terrifying. And so it came, said, write a book. And what happened? Thelema. So all of these things, this is why I want to talk to a John Dee specialist. All of these things go together. And they always talk about, he just saw the God, the Father, and the Son, and one other Moroni, an angel. No. He saw a total of 24 angels and dead people, not just angels, but dead people. Like his brother died. He saw him. He saw all these dead things and all this stuff, and they don't bring up any of that. And I'm sorry, that's not just one good mushroom trip. Like, come on. It's not just one bad batch of flour. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it helped be more fantastical, but I don't think so. I think he saw something, and I think that it really convicted him. And with Jack Parsons, and even with John Dee, what did it require to make it happen? Sex magic. What happened with Muhammad? Sex magic with polygamy, having more than one wife. What happened with Joseph Smith? Polygamy. So it's just so much of a coincidence that I'm like, and we all know about Aleister Crowley. I won't even get into his sex magic. It's a lot.
Yeah.
He was thrown out of Italy, okay, for his stuff. So I just think that people fail to look at the whole picture, or they know the whole picture. I'm not really sure which one, because there were parchments that were found in a treasure bag. They were known treasure diggers. The family was known treasure diggers. And they also used the dowsing rods and different things. And they were really into this whole magical type stuff. And they'll blow it off and say, well, that was, everybody was back then. It was folk magic. So what? Okay, but they didn't all serve the House of Abrac and talk about it. Where do we get abracadabra from? The House of Abrac. That's where it comes from.
Mm.
And what do? What do magicians do? They pull things out of a hat. Okay, well, Joseph Smith translated the Book of Mormon by putting his seer stone in a hat and putting his face in it. And then he would say, write these symbols down, which they thought were Egyptian, but I think they were the Enochian alphabet. And I think that was automatic writing. This is my own opinion, by the way, everyone. But they did say they look like Egyptian symbols. Well, in that treasure bag that he had, that they found, as they call it, the Joseph or the Smith family relics, because they want to distance it from Joseph Smith. But I'll tell you some things that were in it. His seer stone, which he was never without. Okay, so why was the seer stone in the bag with the parchments that have Enochian language in them, calling out sigils for certain angels or demons? I mean, and they're translated now because people know how to read it. And there was
Right.
3 of them. There was 3 different parchments, and they are creepy looking. They are super creepy looking. And most of them have some sort of sigil on them. And then he also wore a Jupiter talisman his whole life, which was identified by his wife after he died, that yes, that was his, and yes, she wanted it back. So they can't say that one wasn't his.
Ooh.
And he wasn't even born under the sign of Jupiter. It was for a different reason. And I think it has to do with it was the sign for being a really good, like, smooth talker, helps with women, and he had 33 wives. And
Now, is
so
that the same? I'm trying to think who it was. I feel like there was maybe like some sort of like movie where you would always like see like the guy like in like the 70s and stuff. They would go to the disco, and they would, got their collars puffed out, and they got like a necklace on it. It always have like a little symbol on it.
mm-hmm. Yep.
And
Yep.
it's kind of like almost like a
Yep.
weird like
Weird.
looking
Yeah. Yep.
PE looking kind of deal or
Yep,
something like that.
that's what they are. And his, I mean, they have tons of different ones, the talismans, but yes, they call for certain things. And they say, oh, that was for protection, this and that. And I'm like, I know, but still, you have to look at the whole picture. I mean, it's pretty convincing. And they have neighbors that actually wrote testimony because he got in trouble and got arrested for being a treasure digger. And that was like a jaywalking back then. Like they really didn't prosecute people for it because everybody did it. It was folk magic-y. I mean, it was kind of well known back in the day. Everybody was looking for stuff. Okay. But they prosecuted him because his family and him had duped so many people. So all these statements are from like a court. It's not like Joe told Mary and she wrote it down. No, that's not how it is. And he even said they would write circles in the ground with swords, and they had a Mars knife with like the Mars sigil on it. And that's a sacrificial thing. And then they one night they were trying to find treasure, and they did this 3 times. They were walking around muttering, and then they sacrificed one of his sheep that was a big fat black one at midnight. This doesn't sound like it's very on the up and up. Okay.
Not at
Like,
all.
yeah, this sounds like what it is. It's satanic. And the church hides all this. And that's what's frustrating to me, because, and then the whole thing with the Masons comes into play, where he got his Masonic rights through their temple. And 1 month later, he made the temple rights for the Mormons. And that's not a coincidence. Come on. He changed a couple little things, but they're so similar. They're really similar. And people just want to always say, well, he's a poor farm boy. He didn't know. No, he was really smart. He got laid up because he got typhoid when he was a kid. And his mom begged him not to cut his leg off because it got an infection in his leg and it went to the bone. And she begged them, don't cut off the leg, just cut off the parts that are bad. So it took a long time for him to heal. And so you're going to read every single thing in the house. If you're a poor kid that doesn't have anything, it's probably going to be the Bible, one of them. And his mom was this healer. She was a known healer. She was Scottish and Irish is what his background was. They were first generation settlers here. And so I'm like, she probably had a copy of the Magus. I'm like 98%, or he got it from this other guy when he was 14. I can't decide which I think, but neither one will ever be proven. But some of the wording is too similar and it's just, I mean, and to the point where he lived when he actually finished the Book of Mormon to take it to print. There was backing for it because they weren't going to print it because they knew he didn't have money. And the printer that was reading it while he's printing it was cracking up and actually made a satire of it called the Book of Pukei, like Pakai and like Pakuki, and made this whole satire on it to the point where they had to go get a copyright to get him to quit it. Because people made that much fun of it because they knew the family, they knew. And I'm like, it's all too coincidental. And then he did have so he was more inside. And then he had this guy come to town when he was like around 14, when this all supposedly started. And his name was Lumens, last name, like light, like
right.
Too good. And so his soon to be wife, that was her cousin, and he had just come back from Europe and he had all these books with him. He was a doctor. He was a well-read doctor, and he was trying to read people these Greek books, and they were like, "Oh, he knows magic because listen to this weird, he knows how to talk weird. Like, look at this." So he's seen that. He's seen like, "Oh, look, they all gather around him and think he's great and magical because he can read Greek." And I mean, it just plays all into it. Like, did that guy give him a copy of the Magus? I don't know. Even though Joseph had the vision when he was 14, he didn't finish with the whole Book of Mormon stuff till he was in his mid-20s, so he kept saying the angels were delaying him from taking it because he wasn't worthy. The first year it was because he didn't have his brother, and his brother had died, and so of course he didn't have his brother. And it was kind of funny because the dad came out and posted this in the newspaper, so this isn't hearsay, and there's a copy of it online. People can go look at it, but of course people won't. And he wrote this big article saying, like, I would never dig up my son, and anyone that says so is a liar, blah, blah, blah. And it was just this weird article. And everybody was like, nobody said that. Like, what? And then they were like, what? And then so I think they thought maybe they had dug up a little piece of him to take to that angel or something, because they were just putting out fires before, in case somebody saw him messing around with that grave, I feel. But he did print that for no reason. There was like no rhyme or reason for it, which was so strange. And so,
Right.
you
So you
know,
get a little guilty
yeah.
conscience there. It sounds like.
Yeah, or he was afraid somebody saw them.
Right.
And he's like, I would never do that. I would never do that. And same thing with Joseph Smith. They moved his body a whole bunch of times. And not only that, but when he did get the plates, he finally released from the angel that wouldn't give them to him. It was like in the middle of the night, close to 3 a.m, all dressed in black on a hill by himself. His wife's waiting in the carriage that he just got. And he had been the virgin scryer, but now he just got married. See, just barely. And
Mm.
so what's the first thing he does? He doesn't go to a honeymoon. He goes to this hill to get him from the angel, which I believe was probably an angel. Not of light. I didn't say that part. And I think he knew that, he wasn't going to be a virgin anymore. So maybe he was scared that some of that power would go, well, shortly after that, she had a baby almost 9 months to the day. Oh, by the way, it was on the fall equinox too. Don't forget that part. In the middle of the night. Yeah.
Oh, of course.
All dressed in black. Like, so this baby's born and it's so deformed. It only lives like a couple minutes. And it was noted to be severely deformed. And they named it after his dead brother. And so that was his first son. And the other one was the other one's first son, the dad's first son. And what do Masons do to like rise up in ranks? Like, there's always a sacrifice. There always
Mm-hmm.
is. And
Right. And
a
if the
lot of
child's
times it's
already
the first
deformed.
son. Well, and he didn't even know that, but the baby died, and actually of 11 children, only I think 5 of his survived.
Wow.
Most of them dying in infancy, which is also makes you wonder, where the hell did those babies go? Like, if you know anything about satanic anything, that's not good,
No.
or even satanic masonry, not necessarily just brotherhood masonry, but when you get into some of the weird stuff, it gets weird. So he was a master mason. He became a mason. And then 2 days later, he was rose to master mason. That doesn't happen.
Right. I just
That,
realized
yeah.
the other day, and I completely forgot about it, but there is a Masonic lodge in my town. And normally, I remember growing up, like there'd be certain nights where like their little light would be on,
Mm.
and like you would see like hallway lights on, but like you would never see anybody ever going in, never
Right.
see anybody ever coming out. And then other than that, like it would just seem like it was vacant
Like
and
empty.
abandoned.
Yeah.
Yeah, always. And then I was driving through town. I mean, this is probably like maybe like a week or two ago, I feel like. And I just so happened to be driving up past there during the evening time, and I noticed the light was on. And I was like, oh, so they do still do stuff. And then I was looking at the sign again, and then I just kind of, it dawned on me, because like, I've drove past it so many times, like I just ignore it. But like there's a really big upside down star in their symbol. And then I was like,
Yep.
hold on a second.
I've seen this before.
Wait a minute here.
Yep. It's on the temple. It's on the temple, and they're all over, and they've got the moon and the stars, and they've got like the weird, sun things. And they say now, oh yeah, back in the day, they would have just denied. But then when the internet came out, it screwed them, because they're like, oh, these people can look this stuff up. So then they came out and just were like, yep, he's a Mason. We know. And like when I was young, that was not a thing. And when I was young, he was not a polygamist either, at
Mm-hmm.
all. He was true to his one wife, and that was all, and that was it. And then it slowly leaks out. So then they started a campaign saying, don't look up anything on the internet. Doubt your doubts. Don't doubt your faith. That was their real slogan. And so many people started leaving the church because, and then you can go backward in time and you can find prophets. Okay. Prophets are called of God. It says in the Bible, if a prophet is ever wrong, that they are to have everything they've ever said struck. Like if they're proven wrong once. Well, the Mormon prophets are wrong all the time. Like they were racist and didn't let black people in and have the priesthood until after the 1950s, conveniently, when everything was happening, to bring that to an end in this world. And all of a sudden they were like, oh, well, there's all these problems. So, yep, God told me, blah, blah, blah. And God told them, oh, this and that. And they're always changing it. And one of the other things was one of the prophets said, oh, well, we have the true masonry. We have Christian masonry, and it's the true masonry. And I'm like, they just twist everything. Like there's always an answer. Always. If you went to them with all of this, they would have an answer. They, well, you're this is wrong. That's, you're taking that out of context. That's not true. This isn't true. The Bible's only true in as much as it's translated correctly. I'm like, the Bible can be proven that it was translated correctly because they're scrolls. What are you talking about? Your book doesn't have any of that. You've changed it 100 times. So what about that? It's just, it's amazing to me that it's one of the top religions and one of the wealthiest churches. And I don't think it's by any surprise, because that masonry, it comes into play. There's no way. I think they're a part of the top cabal. And so do many people, as far as Mormons, like Jesse Chesabar. And there's a few other people that talk about this that say Mormons are directly involved with like the top cabal people and the elite. And I believe it. And so they have money. I mean, it fits every checkbox,
Right.
And so, and they do say that there's some horrific sexual scandals and different things that have happened in the temple. And there is underground. I don't know as for everywhere, but here in Salt Lake, there is underground tunnels underneath that temple. That there's a full grid system underneath the whole city. Yeah.
Really? What do you think the purpose for those are?
Oh, I'm sure the purpose is probably shuffling things in and out that need to go unseen. Just like any tunnel. What do you do in the dark? Nothing good ever comes in the dark. If you have to hide something, then you've got something going on, And I think that's the biggest thing with the church. Like I said, if they want to do that and they want to do satanic rituals, or they want to do Masonic rituals, or they want to be just Masons, then take God's name off of it, because you're leading people astray. Definitely. Otherwise, I don't have a problem with it. If people want to do whatever they want to do, they can do that. They don't have to believe how I believe. That's the beauty of the world. We're not even supposed to push that. We're just supposed to teach. Like, if you teach somebody about God, great. If they accept it, great. If they don't, okay, that's on them. Let it go. That's not what we're called here to do. And we're not called here to shame them either. Like, oh, you're a bad person, you're going to go straight to hell for that one. Like, I don't believe that, so that's everybody's has free will, or we would still be back in the Garden of Eden, because we wouldn't even exist. It would just be Adam and Eve if there was no free will, because there wouldn't have been an option.
Right.
There would have. Yeah. He wanted us to have our free will. I mean, otherwise, what's the point? So, I mean, people can get mad all they want and say, oh, that's not a true Christian because she interviews this person or that person. No, I'm here to show people, like, use your critical thinking, try to reach people that maybe somebody would never talk to somebody about that. Maybe that's all they've known their whole life. Maybe you're going to reach a different person with that, but I won't change my standard, just like maybe you won't change your standard. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we can both agree to disagree and go about our lives, but maybe
because your truth is your truth, and it's not anybody else's place to say otherwise. Because if it's true to you, then it's true to you. Just like things in my life are true to me because they just are, and they don't have to be true to anybody else. And I think especially with podcasting and doing all this stuff, and just having that option to be able to to speak what you want to speak about, and inform
Mm-hmm.
people what you want to inform them on, and just like giving people information that's could possibly help them in the long run.
Right.
And that's beneficial, because again, at the end of the day, we need to love each other, we need to be there for each other and support
Mm-hmm.
everybody. And like one of the overall bad things that I've noticed with any bit of organized religion is how much judgment
Mm-hmm. Yep.
comes from them. And I had a friend in high school, went to the same church as me, and she got pregnant when she was like 16.
Right.
So she started coming in, and she started getting, people were just giving her these eat shit and die looks, like, you were
Mm.
just so
Scum of the
disgusting.
earth. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it got to the point where she was just like, she told her parents, like, I can't do it. I can't keep going there anymore. Like, there's
Right.
there's no reason. And like the further along I get and the bigger my belly gets, like, I'm just going to get judged even harder. I'm going to get hated
Yeah.
on even harder. Like, afterwards, and when everybody's coming up and talking to each other and this and that, other families would come up to hers and like start talking to her parents and just give her like this little side eye, but never like actually like speak to her. And
And
it's
what
like,
and what does it prove? What does it prove at the end of the day? Like, here's the thing. A
mm-hmm,
pregnancy is an actual manifestation of a possible sin. It's not always a sin, but it is a manifestation of something that happened, right?
right,
So her sin is visible, whereas most of us, our sins are not, which is why I named my podcast Unfiltered, because I refuse to filter it down for anybody. Like, if you disagree with me, that's okay. I'm fine about it. I still have a lot to teach people and a lot of teachings from the Bible and God, and I don't cherry pick it. I am true to the Bible 100%. So here's the thing. That doesn't have to be judgmental, though. If I come to you as a sister and I show you something like, okay, this is going to help you in your life, and I'm a positive experience for you and a positive, helpful person to you, and not a negative person on you, you're going to come to me for questions way more than you would if I was mean about it, right? Like, if I'm
exactly,
so pious that I'm so great, you're never going to come to me and say, hey, what about this scripture? I don't know what this means. Then I can't help you. you know if
mm-hmm,
you had a question, like, if you needed some knowledge, if you needed something, and maybe at the end of the day you just wanted that question answered and it doesn't change a thing, but at least you felt comfortable you know and
right,
as for your friend, at the end of the day, what would they like her to do? Because here's the thing, they don't even believe in abortion. So what would they like her to do? There's a baby in there, and at that point her sin is irrelevant. Now it's a miracle inside of her that she needed help, probably more than anything else. She
yep,
probably needed love and acceptance and a little bit of help. That doesn't teach her anything being like that. That teaches her cruelty, and she's going to get enough of that being a young mother on her own, or giving the baby, whichever way you do it you
mm-hmm,
know but she still made the right decision. She didn't end the life.
right,
So why do that? Why make her feel guilty about the very thing you preach about? Don't kill your baby. Well, don't kill your baby, and then turn around and treat her terrible. Like, what? Why?
mm-hmm,
People want to say they're godly and they want to point their finger because you might say a curse word, or you might say the wrong thing, or maybe sometimes I don't know. Maybe I'll just say I don't know, and I'll go look it up. But at least if there's some honesty in a person, you can feel it. I mean,
mm-hmm,
it is what it is. And my love for God is not changed if I go have a talk with a Satanist about John D. I want to know
mm-hmm,
what happened with that situation in my life. But does that mean anything changes for my testimony? Absolutely not. I've been through hell and back with my testimony. There's nothing that can change it at this point.
right, exactly. And sometimes we have to have that conversation with the opposition, as it were,
Yep.
the
Yep.
other side. And if you can't have that open conversation with the conflicting side of what you believe in, then you need to do some reflecting on yourself.
Well,
And
they're so brainwashed that they forget a couple things. Aleister Crowley was a freak, but here's the thing. He was also really well read. Okay. Not such a great writer, but he was well read. As above, so below applies in almost everything. So if you believe in God and angels and a hierarchy of heaven, then I will promise you that there's the devil and legions and a hierarchy there too. So you better know your enemy, because when it comes for you, I would rather be well informed. Period. Period. Why did I know
Yes.
that was a demon that they were talking about? Because I informed myself. I didn't know at first, but I sure did go search it out. You
Mm-hmm.
know, people get scared. They're like, oh, you're talking about demons and that's bad. And da da da. No, I'm not afraid of any of that, because I have the power to squash snakes and scorpions' heads. God says so in Jesus's name. So why should I fear that? Why should I fear the study of that? King James didn't just write the Bible, he wrote a full book on demons as well. And most people don't know that.
Really? I did
He did.
not. I
He
think
did.
I'm gonna have to. Where can you find that at?
That Google that. It's real. Be very careful
Okay.
about reading, but yes. And Solomon did the same thing. And so I'm like, you know that why would he? Okay, he didn't write the Bible like out of his brain, right? He just interpreted it for to enclose it in one book. Okay. Other people
Mm-hmm.
were writers of these chapters. So, same thing with the demons. Why is it in there? It's to teach us. Why do we need to know it? To learn to protect ourselves. Then why do you need to know the other part? I'll ask you this. What sport do you like or play?
Well, it would BMX. I don't really do like
Okay.
football or
No.
baseball
Okay,
or
but
basketball.
you know about football.
Yep,
What do football people do on a team during the week if they're going to play an exceptionally hard team? What do they watch? What do
they're
they
gonna
learn
watch all
about?
the scrimmages.
Of what? Their
The other
enemy,
team.
of their
They'll learn their
enemy.
plays, know what they're gonna do.
Exactly. And I am going to be that Christian, because I'm going to know exactly what to protect myself against and my family and other people, not just myself. Because if we are only about ourselves and our families, then we haven't really accepted the true Christ-like way. That's not what it was.
Hmm.
It's not. We're supposed to have that knowledge and have all of that in us to go fight for everyone. You know, our decision of if you go to heaven or not is not up to me. That's ridiculous. And maybe one day we'll be fighting side by side. You never know. And so I just say, like, you better have all your ducks in a row and have your knowledge and have your armor. Now, I'm not saying for the lay person to go deep dive into this just willy nilly, because honestly, there's some repercussions if you have little openings of, like, oh, that looks like a fun place to go. Yeah, I don't know if I'd do it if I had a lot of vices. I would really make sure you're in a good place mentally, and like not so much physically, but mentally, to like
Hmm.
go down that journey. Not like vices is in smoking or some weird thing. I'm talking about openings in your mind where something could come in, you know.
Right.
um yeah, you've got to arm yourself, and that's the truth. And if we don't watch the scrimmage of our enemy, then what the heck are you going to do when you're really faced with it? I don't know. This God, Jesus is coming back. I know this for sure, but I know there's going to be a war beforehand, and I don't want to be not prepared. Like, and if it never happens in my lifetime, then so be that. But maybe it'll be for my son. Maybe I don't know. I don't know why God's put me on this journey. Never want to do anything like this in my whole entire life. I
But
I I was a
here you are.
nurse. Here I am, normal as could be, like as normy as one could be. Like years ago, I would have been first in line for, the 2020 solution. And I gave him the finger. I never injected one person, and I never received anything. And I think that's really important for people to know, because like I read these things like, I'll never trust another medical person again. I'm like, not all of us bent over, just so you know.
Hmm.
And I would never put that in another human being. Never. I was ready to leave my job and walk away.
I
Some of
think
us
a
still have
lot of people were.
integrity. Yeah. Yep. And not all of us were fooled, you know. But
Hmm.
same thing with God. It goes all back to that. Don't be a fool. Figure it out. Like even you, as much as you know, like I just dropped a bomb, And we
Mhm.
can do an episode on that because I've been looking for someone to do one with, and most people don't want to do that.
Yes. I'm
Most people are like,
completely down.
you want to do what? And they're like, no, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, why? We need to talk about things. We need to
Yes.
explain it. He
I've
didn't,
always found
yeah.
it being interesting, demonologists and how like they just are they know all these things and they've read all these different books and stuff that have been written centuries ago about this stuff, and it's just like and like another thing, like I just it pisses me off that in order for like an exorcism to happen, the Vatican has to approve
Oh
it.
yeah, that's bullcrap.
And
No,
yeah, exactly.
Jesus
Because
walked
so like,
around. What's half of the Bible? What's 3/4 of the Bible? Jesus walking around, casting things out of people. And I'm telling you this, with me working where I work with mental illness, there is a good portion of people that actually have problems that are mentally ill from like no fault of their own, maybe an accident, maybe a chemical imbalance, something, whatever. There's also a good portion that look and appear to be demonized. And it's sad to me that they have to go through that because there's not enough Jesuses to cast anything out. And I'm not saying for the layperson to go do that either. I'm just saying it's sad that there isn't more where people can get help. I'm not saying, oh, Joe Blow on the street should just go start doing that. Like that's crazy,
no,
but
definitely not for everybody. But I think that I just it I was so shocked, and I'm still kind of shocked, and maybe I just haven't looked hard enough yet. But I feel like there should be more people out there
there
who
should
who claim
100%
that that they are exorcists and they can and they can do
help
this stuff,
people
and that they don't need to have the Catholic Church is
sanction. Yeah, the
yeah,
sanctions.
their approval for it whatsoever. Like if you're able to accomplish that feat, then by all means accomplish that fucking feat and get the shit done.
Exactly. And not to be disrespectful to anybody out there that is Catholic, but you have to look at all religion like what you said. And I'm not against them like I am Mormon stuff. And I'm only against them because they lie. But for Catholics, I think a lot of their stuff was influenced at a later point by Santeria because it's really similar in some areas. And I'm not saying that they know that. I'm not saying that people that are Catholics know that. I'm not saying good people don't know that. I'm just saying, like, sometimes the top of the top, it gets kind of messed up, like we're talking about the Vatican. And I
Mm-hmm.
think as many Mormon top of the tops are bought, so are the Catholics, so are all of them. This has to happen for the world to come about to a full fall. The church has to come against us all. They're going to side with Lucifer. They're going to be part of the problem. If you read your scriptures, you already know that. And on top of that, like I said, God called King James to write that Bible and not write it, but put it together. He
Mm-hmm.
must have called him on the demon book as well. Because why the heck else was it published? Why the heck else was it made? Like, what was that about? And that got shoved under a rug. Like, I mean, there's a
You're
lot
right.
of things that we do not understand, but I know this, as much as we can prepare and stay close to God. Like, I get up, I read my scriptures, and I don't read them like this is this day and that's that. No, throw it out the window. I pray and I open that thing. And the message is the living word for a reason, because it could mean something different today than it meant to me yesterday. I could read the same verse today as yesterday and have it apply completely different to my life. So sometimes, now I'm not saying if you've never read it in its entirety, I mean, get a basis, but if you've read it 2 or 3 times, this is what I do. Open it up, pray about it first, and see what that message is for the day. And you don't have to spend hours doing this. That's irrelevant. Hear the message from God. Where are you going to get your message? If everything's so closed off and we don't go on trips to go find God, we don't do any kind of journeys anymore, we don't go within ourselves or have some kind of suffering. Okay, so where the heck are you going to find God? You
Mm-hmm.
have to open yourself up to get that line. People say, well, I've never heard God. I'm like, have you really tried? Really dedicated yourself and really been so down and out that you would open yourself up to that, because a lot of people haven't. No judgment, but it's just the way it is. I've almost died a couple times. So, and wanted to die once because of my daughter. And that one was the one that broke me. Ironically enough, the mental torture that I went through was far worse than any physical torture that I have suffered, because that I always look at Job. I always look at the suffering that Job went through, and people say, well, why would God do that to Job? Or why would God do that to people if he loves us so much? God didn't do anything. He's not the ruler of this world. That has been made clear time and time again. God gives us our free agency, number one. And number two, he is not the ruler of this world. And that is why I think who answered the prayer in the temple was the God of this world. Because it makes sense.
Okay.
And so I don't know. It's interesting to me. It's interesting to me that isn't brought to. Sometimes my Bluetooth just like randomly disconnects. So anyway, I am back. It was off for a minute. But I just think it's interesting that people don't realize God doesn't do any of that. And also, our bodies are just bodies, and this isn't our home. This isn't our home. We're not supposed to love it here.
Nope.
You're not supposed to be so comfortable you want to stay here like the elites that need new bodies. Like, we aren't supposed to like it that much here. I'm not saying hate your life. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying sometimes if you're uncomfortable, it's for a reason. And it's not God's reason. That's somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
He was
Definitely.
left in charge. Yeah, he was left in charge. God is just there for when we need him and call upon him to see if we can make that better. And I know for a fact, for me, that God has helped me through things that I wouldn't have made it through. I was supposed to have died at least twice, and once was last year. I had osteomyelitis in my spinal cord. That doesn't just go away. That's a disaster. And even as a nurse, I knew what I was facing. And I knew that God would have me. I knew. And I kept telling my family, can you guys just stop it? Because they were like, oh, and I get it. I mean, it was scary. And this was months. I had a PICC line going to my heart. I was very sick. And I just told them, we got to stop this because it's just stressing me out and it's useless anyway. Whatever is meant to happen will happen. That's what's going to happen. I'm going to do my part, my best to, eat well, take the medication, do the things I'm supposed to do. And then the rest is out of your hands, which is why people are so weird about God. They don't like shit out of their hands,
No, not at all.
And we have to learn to let that go. When people say, I give it to God, mean it then. Let it go, take a breath and figure out what exactly he can do for you. But you can't just be like, I need this and I need that and I need this. How would you feel if that was you and you never heard praise? You never saw dedication. You never saw anybody come to you unless they needed something. I don't like that. I don't like when people do that to me. It's something to think about.
Definitely.
Yeah. So did I teach you a lot about Mormons?
Yes, actually, there was a lot of things I was not aware of before.
Do you have any questions that you maybe saved up or anything I didn't get?
I do not off the top of my head, and that's
Awesome.
always how I
That
am,
means I did
because
a good job.
it'll be later on. It will be like 3 days later, and then I'm like, oh my God. And then I'm gonna have
You
to
can
ask you.
send me it. Yeah. Well, and I'm hoping to do that. I'll do some research and I would love to get with you and do one on that book because so few people talk about it.
Yes,
It just
I
blows
like
my
I said,
mind.
that's the first time I've ever heard anything about that. So very, very,
Yep.
very
Yes.
curious.
Yes.
And then
It's there.
something else that's kind of strange and funny. So I was recording an episode last night, and I was talking about different kinds of paranormal things, stuff like that. Was talking about how I have activity in my home,
Oh, yeah.
and
I
so
get you.
while I was talking about that, I was unaware of something that was happening outside of this room that I'm in. And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until this morning when I found out. So me and my girlfriend we're sitting in the kitchen. It's before I'm going to work and everything, and we're talking, and she was like, "Hey, did you come out of the room last night?" And I was like,
You're like, what?
"No, why?" And she was like, well, I'd heard what I thought was like the door open, and I never see you come out or anything. I was like, no, I wasn't in there. And so she ended up getting up, and she had like the lights off, and almost walked into a door in the hallway. And it turns out the closet door that sits just to the left of this door right here
Mm-hmm.
had opened wide up on its
Oh,
own
wow.
as I'm sitting here talking about
Mhm.
spirits being in my home.
Really weird stuff happens. And especially, okay, I went through a lot of things to get rid of the weird stuff when I came out of Mormonism. And I think they liked where they lived. And if you try to get rid of them and you don't do a good job, what does it say? It says seven will come in their place, right? And so I did make a
Mm-hmm.
video about spiritual warfare, which I think might help you. And the closer you get to where you just might believe more in God, like how you said, you now know that there can be a God, along with other things that you believe, and it's changed your mind a little bit. The
Mm-hmm.
more open you get to that, the more things are going to start happening. Because if they do like to not inhabit you, but like follow you, there's difference, they're
Right.
going to be mad. And
Mm-hmm.
especially where you were getting ready to talk to me, because I'm very all about like, this is what you should do, this is what you need to listen to, blah blah blah. I'll send you some stuff. But and people are like, oh, that got worse. And I'm like, oh, it'll get worse, and then it will get better. It doesn't get
Mm-hmm.
better all at once. And even still, when I did a podcast with somebody it was about a week ago, and I would have thought I was actually losing it if my son hadn't been there, and he's 15, he's not 5, so he's reputable like enough to get it. um we went upstairs and he's like, do you smell that? And I was like, yeah. And then he's like, I think it's the dog. And I'm like, yeah, I think it's the dog. And then my dog is there, and I'm in the bedroom, and then I see the dog come in. So it wasn't the dog, because he wasn't over where he normally is. And the dog stopped. He didn't turn around. He backed out and left. And I was like, oh. And it was right after I had talked to someone, a whole bunch of people on a tavern, about God, and about how God really is. Like, God isn't this thing that they make him into that's ridiculous. It's literally ridiculous. Like, and so I was explaining grace and love and all these things. Not that I'm saying people aren't punished for their sins. I'm not saying that. Okay. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
saying, like, God is just like you or I as a parent. There are few things I can imagine in my life that I wouldn't forgive my child for. Okay.
Right.
He loves us way more than that. And so that's amazing to people to open their eyes. And that's kind of what I was discussing. And so anyway, my son said, it smells like rotten meat in here. And I was like, yeah, it does. So we were looking all over, and I'm a nurse. I'm super weirdo, clean OCD lady. Like, everything's perfectly placed all over my house. Like, I'm very like that. And so he's like, yeah, especially your room, because you're like wild about your room. And I mean, changing sheets every 3 to 4 days. Like, I am really diligent. And so I was like looking, and as we were looking, it's moving, and I'm trying to get the dog to come back, and the dog's like, heck no, I'm not going back in there. Not, I had a jerky treat, duck jerky. He loves duck jerky. He was like, no way, no way. He would not come back in that
Mm-hmm.
room. And then we started praying and praying, and then it finally stopped. But then my dog finally came back in the room, went straight to a chair, and that smell was everywhere on that chair, but not just the chair, below the chair, like on the dress that was hanging on the chair, on the shoes underneath the chair. Like, it wasn't just one spot, like on a bad chair or something. And it was
Right.
literally, my son looked at me and he goes, it's literally like it sat there. And I was like, so yeah, we're just praying. We're
Yeah,
not going to
it
go
definitely
there.
sounds
Yeah.
like that.
And
Oh,
so what I'm telling you is, if you're opening your mind more to being more, accepting of God, it's gonna, it probably will ramp up, because
oh yeah, and even before that, over the weekend, I was to go onto a podcast Sunday night, And when we had got on there, we started having issue after issue. And it
Yeah.
was just like, you know, we started having issues to where, like, you know, only one person in the
I
group
remember you telling me that.
was able to, you know, was having to hear it and everything. So we ended up calling it at night, but Monday night instead. And like I walked out and I immediately sat down and I just kind of started laughing. And I'm just like, there was something
What is going on? Yep.
clearly fucking with shit, trying to
Well,
not get
you
this
do
to come
know
out.
the devil is has dominion over the airways. So that's part of what he has dominion over. He has dominion over specific things, and people need to like understand those things so that they can better prepare themselves. So before you go on air, say, in God's name, in Jesus Christ's name, I take dominion over my airways, over my electrical things, blah blah blah. Because honestly, and you'll notice, like, if you sit down to study the Bible or watch a Bible something, you'll get 1,000 distractions, but you can watch TV all day and never get a one. But then if you start doing something that's God centered, it doesn't have to be just studying the Bible. It could be a song you put on to worship or whatever. And you'll notice, like, oh, you'll get a phone call. Oh, the dog will bark. Oh, the kids need something. Oh, blah, 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 blah. And it's all distraction. It's all a distraction. So
Definitely, definitely.
I would definitely pray lots.
All right, will do. Anyways, we are about two and a
Yep.
half hours now, so I figure this is probably
Wow.
a good
That's awesome.
stopping point for
Yeah, for
us.
sure.
So
Yeah, I
again,
think we've covered
tell
it.
everybody where they can find you at and all the
All
things
the
that
things.
they wanna listen to you, get into touch with you, whatever it
Yep.
may be.
Awesome. So I am at the Unfiltered Rise on all of the socials, on Instagram. Most of the time, I do have a TikTok. I'm on all the platforms, Spotify. Let's see what else. iHeartRadio. I'm on Apple. I'm on all the things in YouTube. All the big ones, all the little ones. So you should be able to find me there at Unfiltered Rise. And also, my email is unfilteredrise@gmail.com. If you have a story you'd like to share with me or get in touch with me, that is how you do that. So
Awesome. And it was great having you on.
it
I
was
can't wait to
good.
have you on
Yes.
again.
We'll
And
do
we'll
it.
definitely do this demon
We'll do
book.
it.
We'll just get
Yep.
that completely lit. That
We'll
sounds
teach
great.
people how to be armed because nobody is coming to save you like they did in Jesus's day. Nobody does it anymore.
Exactly. Nope, not at
So
all.
let's arm up
Well,
some people.
exactly. All right, guys. And that will end tonight's episode of the Big Grimbowski. Stay weird, y'all.